The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our downtown Seattle condo, casting long shadows across the polished concrete floors. I was reviewing security protocols for a new client, a biotech company whose intellectual property was worth more than most small countries' GDP when Tom appeared in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee. "Lena," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone I'd learned to recognize over our 3 years of marriage. Careful, measured, the same voice he used when presenting quarterly reports to investors. "We need to talk." I glanced up from my laptop, noting the way he remained standing rather than settling into his usual spot on the leather sectional. Tom Whitmore had always been a creature of habit: morning coffee, financial news, 30 minutes on the Peloton, shower, then the drive to his downtown office where he managed portfolios for Seattle's tech elite. This deviation from routine sent the first ping of alert through my analyst's brain. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." "About what?" I asked, accepting the coffee he offered. "French. Roast black. Exactly how I preferred it." Even now, he remembered these small details. Tom ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. Now it struck me as performative, like he was following a script. "About us. About where we're heading." I set down my coffee with deliberate care, the ceramic making the softest click against the glass table. 3 years of marriage to a financial advisor had taught me to recognize when someone was about to deliver bad news while trying to frame it as an opportunity. "Go on. I think we should consider a divorce," he said, settling into the chair across from me with studied casualness. "A peaceful one. No lawyers, no drama, no fighting over assets. Just a clean break." The words hit me like a system crash, sudden, complete, and leaving me momentarily unable to process. I'd built my career on identifying vulnerabilities, on spotting the cracks in digital armor that others missed. Yet I hadn't seen this coming. "A peaceful divorce," I repeated, my voice steady despite the way my heart was suddenly hammering against my ribs. "Exactly." Tom leaned forward, his blue eyes earnest in that way that had first attracted me at a tech networking event for years ago. "We've both grown in different directions. You're consumed with your work, which is incredible. Don't get me wrong, and I'm realizing I need something different. We can handle this like adults, split things fairly, file the paperwork, and move on with our lives." I studied his face the way I would analyze code, looking for hidden functions and backdoors. The slight tension around his eyes, the way his left hand rested flat against his thigh, fingers spread, a tell I'd noticed whenever he was nervous. "About a particularly risky investment." "This is sudden," I said. "Is it?" He tilted his head, and for a moment I saw a flash of something: impatience, relief, before his expression smoothed back into careful consideration. "I think we've both felt it. The distance. We're like roommates more than spouses." There was truth in that observation, but it felt like a deflection. Over the past 6 months, Tom had become increasingly absent: late nights at the office, weekend client dinners, business trips that seemed to multiply. I'd attributed it to the volatility in the tech sector, the pressure on financial advisors to keep their high net worth clients happy in uncertain times. "What about counseling?" I asked, though even as the words left my mouth, I was analyzing the micro expressions crossing his face. The barely perceptible tightening around his eyes suggested this wasn't a conversation but a presentation of a predetermined conclusion. "I don't think it would help." Tom's voice carried a note of finality. "We want different things, Lena. You want to build your empire, and I need a partner who's present, who wants to travel, maybe start a family. That's not where you are, and that's okay." The mention of family struck a particular nerve. We'd discussed children exactly once, early in our relationship, and had reached a mutual understanding that our careers came first. It had never been a source of tension between us, until now apparently. "So you've already made up your mind?" I said. "I've given it a lot of thought, yes." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "But I want this to be mutual. I want us both to be happy." I looked down at our joined hands, noting the way his wedding ring caught the morning light. 3 years of marriage, 4 years together, and it all came down to this sterile conversation that felt more like a business transaction than the end of a relationship. "Okay," I said. Tom's eyebrows lifted slightly. "Okay. If that's what you want, then yes. A peaceful divorce sounds reasonable." The relief that washed over his features was unmistakable, and something cold settled in my chest. This conversation hadn't been about seeking my input or exploring alternatives. It had been about obtaining my compliance. I'm glad you see it that way, Tom said, squeezing my hand. I was worried you might, well, that it might get complicated. No, I said, my voice calm and professional. I don't see any reason why it should be complicated. We talked for another 20 minutes about logistics, who would stay in the condo, how to handle joint accounts, the timeline for filing paperwork. Tom had clearly thought through every detail, which was either impressively thorough or suspiciously premature. I found myself cataloging his responses, noting the way he deflected when I asked about specific assets and the slight hesitation when I mentioned our shared investment accounts after he left for the office. I sat in the silence of my condo, staring out at Elliott Bay. The morning ferry was making its way across the water, carrying commuters to work, to meetings, to lives that hadn't just been upended over coffee and careful explanations. I opened my laptop and began doing what I did best, investigating. Our joint banking portal loaded with the familiar interface I'd helped Tom set up 2 years ago when we'd consolidated our finances. Everything looked normal at first glance: checking account, savings, the investment portfolio Tom managed. But as I scrolled through recent transactions, a discrepancy caught my eye: a transfer for $15,000 to an account I didn't recognize, dated 3 days ago. The memo line read consulting services, but I handled all our consulting expenses, and I had no record of this payment. I opened a new browser window and began tracing the routing number. It led to a bank in Delaware, but the search results were frustratingly vague. The account holder information was masked behind corporate privacy shields. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom: meeting with Peterson about the Henderson account. Home late. Love you. Love you. Even now, he was maintaining the performance. I spent the next 3 hours diving deeper into our financial records, cross-referencing statements and transaction histories. What I found made my blood pressure spike and my analyst brain shift into high gear. 7 transfers over the past 4 months, all to different accounts, all labeled as consulting services or business expenses. The amounts varied: $8,000, $12,000, $15,000, but they followed a pattern. Small enough to avoid triggering automatic fraud alerts, large enough to matter when added together. Someone was methodically draining our accounts, someone who had access to our banking credentials, our financial records, our trust. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the spreadsheet I'd built to track the anomalies. $63,000, moved to accounts I couldn't identify, with explanations that didn't match our actual expenses. The peaceful divorce wasn't the beginning of the end of our marriage. It was the end of a carefully orchestrated theft. I closed the laptop and walked to the window, watching the afternoon light dance across the water. Tom wanted a peaceful divorce, and he'd been so relieved when I'd agreed without a fight. No lawyers, no drama, no digging into assets, a clean break. I smiled for the first time since our morning conversation, the expression sharp and calculating. Tom was about to learn that when you try to hack a cybersecurity expert, you'd better make sure your own system is bulletproof, and his was about to be thoroughly compromised. The next morning, I called in sick to work, the first time I'd taken an unscheduled day off into years. Instead of heading to my downtown office, I drove to Fremont, to the converted warehouse that housed Anya Delgado's forensic accounting practice. Anya and I had met during a fraud investigation 3 years ago, when a tech startup had hired both of us to determine whether their CFO was embezzling funds. She'd tracked the money, I'd traced the digital footprints, and we'd built an airtight case that sent the CFO to federal prison. More importantly, we'd built a friendship based on mutual respect and a shared appreciation for precision. You look like hell, Anya said when I appeared at her office door, 2 cups of Cuban coffee in hand. Thank you for the honesty. I handed her a cup and settled into the chair across from her desk. I need your help. Anya's dark eyes sharpened. She was small and fierce, with silver-streaked hair that she kept in a perpetual bun and a reputation for dismantling financial fraud with surgical precision. Professional or personal? Both. I laid out everything: Tom's peaceful divorce proposal, the suspicious transfers, my growing certainty that our marriage was ending not because of emotional distance but because of financial theft. Anya listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. Show me the transactions, she said when I finished. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I'd compiled. Anya studied it for several minutes, her expression growing increasingly grim. "This is sophisticated," she said finally. "Whoever set this up knows how to stay under fraud detection thresholds and how to mask transaction purposes. The amounts, the timing, the variety of destination accounts. This isn't impulsive. This is planned." "How planned?" "Months, maybe longer." Anya opened her own laptop and began typing. "Give me the routing numbers for these destination accounts. I want to see what I can find." For the next 2 hours, we worked in focused silence. Anya traced money flows while I dug deeper into our joint digital accounts, looking for patterns and anomalies I might have missed. What we uncovered was worse than I'd imagined. "Lena," Anya's voice was tight. "Look at this." She turned her screen toward me. It showed a corporate registration document for something called Whitmore Holdings LLC, filed in Delaware 6 months ago. The registered agent was a corporate services company, but the beneficial owner was listed as Thomas J. Whitmore. My husband had created a shell company without telling me. "There's more," Anya continued, pulling up additional documents. "Whitmore Holdings has been receiving regular transfers from your joint accounts, but it's also been making payments to real estate companies, investment firms, and what looks like offshore account setup fees." I stared at the screen, my training in threat assessment warring with the emotional impact of seeing my husband's name on documents that proved he'd been systematically betraying me. "How much?" I asked. "So far, about $200,000 has moved through this company." "But Lena," Anya's voice carried a warning, "I think this is just what I can see. Professional money laundering usually involves multiple layers, multiple companies. If Tom is sophisticated enough to set up a Delaware LLC and route funds through it, he's sophisticated enough to have backup systems." She pulled up another document, and my breath caught. "This is a signature card for a Bank of America account opened 4 months ago," Anya said. "The signature on file is yours." I stared at my own signature, perfectly replicated on a document I'd never seen, for an account I'd never opened. "He forged my signature," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "More than that. Look at the address on the account." Anya highlighted a line on the document. "This is your office address. Someone would have had to provide identification, utility bills, documentation that proved they lived or worked at that address. This isn't casual identity theft, Lena. This is systematic financial fraud." The implications crashed over me like a wave. Tom hadn't just been moving our shared money, he'd been using my identity to create entirely new financial instruments. Accounts I didn't know about, bearing my name and signature. "What else do you need to see the full picture?" I asked. "Everything. Bank statements, investment accounts, tax returns, insurance policies. And I need to know about any assets that are solely in your name. Property, retirement accounts, business holdings." I thought about my consulting business, the company I'd built from nothing into a 7-figure enterprise. All of my client contracts, intellectual property, and retained earnings were held in corporate accounts under my control. Or so I'd believed. "My business accounts," I said. "I need to check." My business accounts. I logged into the portal for Rivera Cybersecurity Solutions, my pulse hammering as I navigated to the corporate banking interface. Everything looked normal at first: current balance, recent deposits from clients, standard operating expenses. But when I pulled up the detailed transaction history, there they were. Transfers I hadn't authorized, payments to vendors I'd never contracted, consulting fees paid to companies I'd never heard of. "Anya," I said, my voice hollow, "he's been stealing from my business accounts too." She moved to look over my shoulder, scanning the transactions. "How much access does Tom have to your business?" "None, theoretically." I scrolled through months of unauthorized activity. "He's not a signatory on any accounts. He's not listed as an authorized user. But he's your husband," Anya finished. "He has access to your personal documents, your passwords, your social security number. And if he's been planning this for months, he's had time to collect everything he needs to impersonate you with financial institutions." The scope of the betrayal was becoming clear. Tom hadn't asked for a peaceful divorce because our marriage had run its course. He'd asked for a peaceful divorce because he'd already stolen everything he could get his hands on, and now he needed to disappear before I noticed. "What's our next move?" I asked. Anya closed her laptop and fixed me with a steady look. "We document everything. Every transaction, every forged signature, every unauthorized account. We build a case so airtight that when you're ready to act, no one can question what happened here. And then you decide whether you want to handle this through divorce court or federal criminal court. Because what Tom has done isn't just marital misconduct, Lena. It's identity theft, wire fraud, and money laundering. We're talking about felony charges that could put him in prison for years. I thought about Tom's relief when I'd agreed to a peaceful divorce, his careful emphasis on keeping things simple and avoiding lawyers. He'd been counting on my compliance, on my desire to handle things professionally and discreetly. He'd been counting on me not looking too closely at the numbers. How long do we have? I asked. That depends on how much more he plans to take and how quickly he wants to finalize the divorce. But Lena, if he's been this systematic about moving assets, he probably has an exit strategy. The peaceful divorce might be step one in a larger plan. I nodded, already thinking 3 moves ahead. Tom believed he was dealing with his trusting wife, someone who would accept his explanations and sign whatever papers he put in front of her. He was wrong. I need to talk to someone who can help me understand the legal implications, I said. Someone who can guide us through building a case that will stand up in court. Do you have a lawyer? I smiled, and for the first time since Tom's peaceful divorce conversation, it felt genuine. Better. I have a judge. Judge Solomon Graves lived in a craftsman house in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, surrounded by law books and memories of 40 years on the federal bench. He'd been my mentor since I'd first started working with law enforcement agencies, translating cyber threats into language that courts could understand. More than that, he'd become a surrogate father figure after my parents died in a car accident. When I was 25, Lena, he said, opening the door with the warm smile that had always made me feel like family. This is an unexpected pleasure. Come in. His study was exactly as I remembered, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive oak desk, and the lingering scent of pipe tobacco even though he'd quit smoking years ago. I settled into the leather chair where I'd sat dozens of times before, seeking advice on cases, career decisions, and life choices. You look troubled, Judge Graves said, settling behind his desk. At 73, he remained sharp and imposing, his silver hair perfectly groomed and his dark eyes missing nothing. I need legal advice, I said, and I need discretion. You have both. What's happened? I laid out everything on you, and I had discovered the forged signatures, the shell companies, the systematic theft of assets from both my personal and business accounts. Judge Graves listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. How much money are we talking about? He asked when I finished. Conservatively, $500,000. But I think there's more I haven't found yet. Judge Graves leaned back in his chair, his expression grave. Lena, what your husband has done constitutes multiple federal crimes. Wire fraud, identity theft, money laundering. These are serious charges that carry significant prison sentences. I know, but I need to understand my options. Tom is expecting me to sign divorce papers to accept whatever settlement he proposes. If I refuse, if I start making accusations, he might accelerate whatever timeline he's working on. You think he plans to disappear? I think he's been preparing for months. The peaceful divorce gives him a clean exit, no contentious legal proceedings, no detailed examination of assets, no reason for me to hire forensic accountants or dig into financial records. Judge Graves nodded slowly. So the question is how to proceed without alerting him to what you've discovered. Exactly. There are several approaches, he said, opening a leather portfolio and pulling out a fresh legal pad. The first is immediate. We contact federal prosecutors and turn over everything you found. They'll open an investigation, freeze assets, and arrest Tom. Justice will be swift, but you'll have no control over the process. I shook my head. I want control. I want to understand the full scope of what he's done before anyone else gets involved. I thought you might say that. Judge Graves smiled slightly. The second approach is more complex but allows you to maintain the initiative. We let Tom believe his plan is working while you systematically document his crimes and recover your assets. How? You play the compliant wife. You sign whatever divorce papers he presents, but we structure them to protect your interests without him realizing it. Meanwhile, you continue investigating, tracing money flows, and identifying all the assets he's stolen or hidden. Judge Graves began sketching a timeline on his legal pad. The key is maintaining the fiction that you're cooperating while actually building an unassailable legal case. When you're ready, when you've recovered everything you can and documented every crime, then you spring the trap. What kind of trap? Civil and criminal proceedings filed simultaneously. You sue for divorce on grounds of fraud and seek recovery of all marital assets. At the same time, federal prosecutors file criminal charges based on the evidence you've gathered. Tom finds himself fighting on multiple fronts with no assets to finance his defense. The elegance of the strategy appealed to my analytical mind. Instead of reacting to Tom's betrayal, I would be orchestrating a response that turned his own methods against him. There are risks, Judge Graves continued. If Tom realizes what you're doing, he could accelerate his timeline. He might disappear with whatever money he's already moved, or he might become dangerous if he feels cornered. Tom isn't violent, I said. He's calculating and manipulative, but he's not physical. Men who feel their freedom threatened can surprise you. You need to consider personal security as part of this plan. I nodded, already thinking about the security measures I routinely recommended to clients. Motion sensors, surveillance cameras, digital monitoring systems, tools I could deploy to protect myself while gathering evidence. What's the first step? I asked. We need to understand exactly what Tom is planning. You said he wants to handle the divorce peacefully without lawyers. That suggests he has papers prepared, probably a settlement agreement that he believes favors him. He hasn't shown me anything yet. When he does, you bring it to me immediately. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Don't even ask questions. That might reveal you're analyzing the terms. Just tell him you need time to review it. Judge Graves tore off the sheet with his timeline and handed it to me. In the meantime, continue documenting everything. Bank records, forged signatures, shell company registrations. Build a comprehensive picture of his financial crimes. What about recovery? Some of the money has been moved offshore. Can I get it back? Potentially. Financial fraud cases often involve asset recovery actions, especially when the theft involved identity fraud. The key is acting before the money disappears entirely into jurisdictions that don't cooperate with U.S. law enforcement. I studied the timeline Judge Graves had sketched, mentally calculating the resources I'd need to execute this plan. Digital forensics, asset tracing, legal documentation. It would be like running a complex cybersecurity investigation, except the target was my own life. There's one more thing, Judge Graves said. You'll need allies, people you trust absolutely, who can help you execute this plan without Tom realizing what's happening. I have Anya. Good. You may need others. Technical experts, private investigators, financial specialists. This isn't something you can do alone. I thought about my professional network: former FBI agents, cybersecurity specialists, forensic accountants, people who understood both the technical and legal aspects of financial crime. I know someone who might be able to help with the digital investigation, I said. Someone with skills in areas that aren't entirely conventional. Judge Graves raised an eyebrow. I don't need to know the details, but whatever you're planning, make sure it's legally admissible. Evidence obtained through illegal means won't help you in court, understood? One final consideration, Lena. This plan requires you to maintain a performance for weeks or possibly months. You'll need to continue living with Tom, interacting with him normally, perhaps even being intimate with him, all while knowing what you know. That's psychologically demanding in ways you might not expect. The thought of maintaining the facade of marriage while investigating Tom's betrayal was daunting, but not impossible. I'd spent years in cybersecurity work that required compartmentalization, the ability to separate professional analysis from personal emotions. I can handle it, I said. I believe you can. But if at any point you feel unsafe or overwhelmed, we move to immediate action. Your well-being is more important than any legal strategy. I stood to leave, feeling more centered than I had since Tom's peaceful divorce announcement. I had a plan, allies, and most importantly, I had regained control of the situation. Judge, I said as I reached the door, when this is over, when I've recovered everything and Tom is facing the consequences of what he's done, will it feel like justice? Judge Graves considered the question carefully. Justice isn't revenge, Lena. It's accountability. It's ensuring that actions have consequences and that victims are made whole. Whether that feels satisfying, he paused. That depends on what you're seeking. Punishment for Tom, or restoration for yourself? Both, I said. Then you'll need to be very careful about how you execute this plan. The law can provide accountability, but healing, that's something you'll need to find for yourself. As I drove home through the Seattle traffic, I found myself thinking about Judge Graves' final words. Tom had stolen more than money, he'd stolen my trust, my sense of security, my belief in our shared future. Recovering the financial assets would be only part of the restoration I needed, but it would be a start, and by the time Tom realized what was happening, it would be far too late for him to stop it. The address Victor Ma had given me led to a converted warehouse in Georgetown, wedged between a craft brewery and an artisanal cheese shop. The kind of place where Seattle's tech underground gathered to drink overpriced coffee and discuss cryptocurrency while pretending they weren't planning the next digital revolution. I found Victor in the back corner, hunched over 3 monitors, displaying cascading code that looked like digital hieroglyphics. He hadn't changed much in the 5 years since I'd last seen him, still impossibly thin, still dressed in black jeans and a faded band t-shirt, still radiating the focused intensity of someone who saw the world in ones and zeros. Lena Rivera, he said without looking up from his screens. I wondered when you'd need my particular skill set again. Victor, I slid into the chair across from him, noting the way his fingers never stopped moving across the keyboard even as we spoke. I need a favor. From the woman who convinced me to flip on the Kozlov crime family and testify for the FBI. Victor finally looked up, his dark eyes amused. I think I still owe you a few favors. Victor Ma had been one of the most talented black hat hackers on the West Coast until I'd caught him during a government contract 5 years ago. Instead of prosecuting him, I'd offered him a choice: federal prison or cooperation with law enforcement. He'd chosen cooperation, and his testimony had helped dismantle a sophisticated cybercrime network. This is personal, I said, and it needs to stay completely off the books. The best kind of work. Victor minimized his code windows and gave me his full attention. What do you need? I explained the situation: Tom's betrayal, the stolen assets, my plan to gather evidence while maintaining the appearance of compliance. Victor listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding as I described the digital forensics challenges I was facing. So you need to get inside your husband's digital life without him knowing, Victor summarized when I finished. Email, banking, encrypted communications, the works, exactly. But everything has to be legally admissible. No illegal access, no hacking, no methods that would compromise a criminal case. Victor laughed, a sound like grinding gears. You want me to break into someone's digital life using only legal methods? That's like asking me to pick a lock using only the front door key. There has to be a way. Shared devices, legitimate access, points, social engineering that doesn't cross legal lines. Oh, there's always a way. Victor opened a new terminal window and began typing. The question is how patient you are and how much risk you're willing to accept. For the next hour, Victor outlined a plan that was both elegant and terrifying. In its scope, the foundation was simple. As Tom's wife, I had legitimate access to shared devices and accounts. The challenge was expanding that access without triggering security alerts or leaving digital fingerprints that could be traced back to me. We start with your home network, Victor explained, pulling up a network diagram on one of his monitors. Every device that connects to your Wi-Fi leaves traces: connection logs, data transfers, cache files. I can install monitoring software on your router that captures metadata without actually intercepting content. Metadata tells us what devices are connecting, when they're active, and how much data they're transferring. If Tom is moving money or communicating with accomplices, we'll see the patterns even if we can't see the specific content. What about his personal devices? Trickier, but not impossible. Does Tom ever leave his phone or laptop unattended at home? I thought about our morning routines. The way Tom sometimes left his phone charging in the kitchen while he showered, how his laptop often sat open on the dining table during weekend mornings, sometimes, but never for long enough. Victor opened another window showing what looked like a USB drive, except smaller and disguised as a phone charger. This is a hardware keylogger. Plug it into any device for 30 seconds, and it captures every keystroke for the next 6 months. Passwords, account numbers, private messages, everything. Is it legal? On devices you own or have authorized access to? Absolutely. On your husband's personal devices that he brings into your shared home? Victor shrugged. That's a question for lawyers, not hackers. I thought about Judge Graves' warning about evidence obtained through illegal means. The line between legitimate surveillance and illegal intrusion was thinner than I'd hoped. What else? Social engineering. People are always the weakest link in any security system. Victor pulled up what looked like a social media profile. We create a fictional identity, maybe a potential client, maybe a business partner, and use it to initiate contact with Tom. People share amazing amounts of information with strangers who seem legitimate. Tom is careful about new contacts. He vets potential clients thoroughly. Everyone has blind spots. Ex-colleagues, college friends, professional connections. We find someone from his past, create a reason for them to reconnect, and use that relationship to gather intelligence. Victor's plan was comprehensive and largely legal, but it required skills I didn't possess. More importantly, it required someone I could trust absolutely to execute the technical aspects while I focused on maintaining my cover. What do you want for this? I asked. The usual rate for corporate digital forensics, Victor said, plus the satisfaction of taking down someone who thinks they're smarter than they are. I hate financial predators. Done. Victor grinned, and for a moment I saw the mischievous hacker who'd once brought down an entire city's traffic light system just to prove he could. When do we start? Tonight? Tom has a client dinner. He'll be gone for at least 3 hours. Perfect, Victor began, packing equipment into a nondescript backpack. I'll need access to your home network, your shared devices, and any physical documents related to Tom's business activities. What about operational security? If Tom is as sophisticated as I think, he might be monitoring our communications too. Already thought of that. Victor handed me a burner phone still in its packaging. Encrypted messaging app, anonymous cellular service, paid for with cryptocurrency. Even if Tom is monitoring your regular communications, he won't see anything. On this device, as I prepared to leave, Victor grabbed my arm gently. Lena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. What? How sure are you that Tom doesn't know you're investigating him? The question sent a chill through me. I'd been focused on gathering evidence while maintaining my cover, but I hadn't considered the possibility that Tom might be aware of my activities. Why? Do you ask? Because sophisticated financial fraud usually includes counter-surveillance measures. If Tom has been planning this for months, if he's set up shell companies and offshore accounts, he's probably also monitoring your digital activities. Email, web browsing, banking access, he could be tracking all of it. I thought about the way Tom had seemed so relieved when I'd agreed to the peaceful divorce, his careful emphasis on keeping things simple. Had that been genuine? Or had he been testing my reaction? What would you look for? I asked. If you were in Tom's position, how would you monitor me? Keyloggers on shared devices, monitoring software on your phone, tracking apps in your car, maybe even physical surveillance. If he's really paranoid, Victor's expression was serious. The good news is that if he is monitoring you, we can turn that against him. Feed him false information, make him think you're doing exactly what he expects. And the bad news, if Tom realizes you're investigating him, he might accelerate his timeline, disappear with whatever money he's already moved, maybe even take steps to ensure you can't pursue him. I left the warehouse with Victor's burner phone and a new appreciation for the complexity of what I was attempting. Tom wasn't just stealing money, he was playing a sophisticated game of deception and counter-surveillance. But two could play that game. By the time I reached home, I had a text from Tom on my regular phone. Dinner running late. Don't wait up. Love you. Perfect. 3 hours later, Victor and I had transformed my home network into a digital surveillance operation that would have impressed the NSA. Keyloggers on shared devices, network monitoring software, and a suite of social engineering tools designed to penetrate Tom's digital defenses. Phase 1 is complete, Victor said as he packed up his equipment. Now we wait and see what your husband reveals about himself. How long before we have actionable intelligence? Days? Maybe weeks. It depends on how active Tom is and how sloppy he gets. But Lena, Victor paused at the door. Whatever we find, it's going to be worse than you think. It always is. After Victor left, I sat in the darkness of my living room, watching the city lights reflect off Elliott Bay. Tom would be home soon, probably bearing flowers or wine, maintaining the performance of a husband who'd made a difficult but necessary decision. I would smile and accept his gestures, play the role of a woman gracefully accepting the end of her marriage. But now I had digital eyes and ears throughout his world. Every email, every phone call, every financial transaction would be captured and analyzed. Tom wanted a peaceful divorce. He was about to discover that peace was a luxury he could no longer afford. 3 weeks of surveillance yielded a digital portrait of betrayal so comprehensive that even Anya was speechless when I showed her the evidence. Jesus, Lena, she whispered, scrolling through the financial records Victor's monitoring software had captured. This isn't just theft. This is systematic asset stripping on an industrial scale. We were back in her Fremont office, surrounded by printouts and spreadsheets that documented Tom's elaborate financial empire. What had started as suspicious transfers had revealed itself as a complex network of shell companies, offshore accounts, and forged documents spanning multiple countries and jurisdictions. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Walk me through it, I said, though I'd already memorized every detail. Anya opened her laptop and pulled up the organizational chart we'd built over the past 3 weeks. Tom didn't just steal your money, Lena. He's been systematically transferring ownership of assets into a network of companies he controls. The chart looked like a corporate family tree designed by someone with advanced paranoia. Whitmore Holdings LLC was just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it were layers of subsidiary companies, each one serving a specific purpose in Tom's financial shell game. Here, Anya pointed to a cluster of companies registered in Delaware. These 3 LLCs exist solely to hold real estate assets. The beach house in Carmel, the cabin in Whistler, the investment properties in Portland, they've all been transferred out of your joint ownership and into these companies. How is that possible? I never signed any transfer documents. Because Tom forged your signature on quitclaim deeds, then had them notarized by accomplices. Anya pulled up scanned documents that made my blood run cold. Your signature, perfectly replicated, transferring millions of dollars in real estate to companies you've never heard of. The scope of the forgery was breathtaking. Tom hadn't just stolen my money, he'd stolen my identity, using it to systematically strip away everything we'd built together. What about the offshore accounts? That's where it gets really sophisticated. Anya opened another window showing wire transfer records. Tom set up accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Estonia. Each one is linked to a different shell company, and each company has a legitimate business purpose on paper. She scrolled through what looked like corporate filings for consulting companies, investment advisors, and technology firms. All of them registered to addresses I didn't recognize, all of them listing Tom as the beneficial owner. The Estonia connection is particularly clever, Anya continued. Estonia has very strong digital privacy laws and banking secrecy protections. Money transferred there is extremely difficult to trace or recover. How much money are we talking about? Anya was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her running calculations in her head. Based on what we can trace, about $3.2 million. But Lena, I think there's more we haven't found yet. $3.2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. Our joint savings, my business profits, the proceeds from real estate sales I'd thought were still pending, all of it gone, transferred into accounts controlled by the man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years. There's something else, Anya said, her voice careful. Victor's monitoring software captured some encrypted communications. Tom isn't working alone. She pulled up a series of email threads that Victor had managed to decrypt. The messages were between Tom and someone identified only as Wise Casual. Conversations about project timelines and asset liquidity that read like business correspondence but were clearly discussing the systematic theft of my wealth. Who is Wise? I asked, though I had a growing suspicion. We're not sure yet. But based on the context of the messages, this person has been involved from the beginning. They discuss your daily routines, your work schedule, even your emotional state. This isn't just a business partner, Lena. This is someone who's been watching you. I stared at the email threads, trying to process the violation they represented. Tom hadn't just betrayed me financially, he'd turned our marriage into a surveillance operation, reporting on my activities to an unknown accomplice. Here's the most recent exchange, Anya said, pulling up messages from 2 days ago. Wise, timeline status? Tom. She signed initial papers yesterday. No questions, no lawyers. I think we're clear. Wise, Estonia transfers complete by Friday? Tom. Confirmed. Property liquidation next week, then we're done. Wise. And after? Tom. Disappear. Different continents, clean break. The casual tone of their planning made me nauseous. Tom was discussing the destruction of my life with the same emotional detachment he might use to discuss stock trades. There's one more thing, Anya said, hesitating. Victor found evidence that someone has been conducting physical surveillance on you, tracking your car, monitoring your movements, photographing your daily routines. She handed me a folder containing dozens of photographs me leaving my office, having lunch with clients, shopping for groceries. They were taken with a telephoto lens from considerable distance, but the detail was crisp enough to read the time stamps on parking meters and identify the people I was meeting with. Someone has been stalking me, I said, my voice flat, for months. The metadata on these photos goes back to before Tom asked for the divorce. They've been building a comprehensive profile of your activities, probably to ensure you wouldn't discover what they were doing. I flipped through the photographs, each one a violation of privacy so profound that I felt physically sick. Images of me taken through windows, captured in supposedly private moments, analyzed and cataloged like evidence in a criminal investigation. Anya, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. I want all of it back. Every dollar, every asset, every piece of property Tom stole. And I want whoever wise is to face the same consequences Tom will. That's going to require a coordinated legal and financial response. Are you ready for that level of warfare? I thought about Tom's peaceful divorce proposal, his careful emphasis on keeping things simple and amicable. He'd been counting on my compliance, my desire to handle things professionally. He'd been counting on me never discovering the photographs, never tracing the shell companies, never realizing that our entire marriage had been a carefully orchestrated theft. More than ready, I said. What do we need to do? Anya opened a fresh legal pad and began writing. First, we need to secure any assets that haven't been transferred yet. Freeze joint accounts, place holds on property sales, ensure Tom can't move any more money while we're building our case. Won't that alert him that I know what he's doing? Yes, but at this point, stealth isn't as important as stopping the bleeding. If Tom completes the Estonia transfers, recovering that money becomes exponentially more difficult. I nodded, understanding the tactical shift. The reconnaissance phase was over. It was time to move to active measures. Second, we need legal representation that specializes in complex financial fraud. Someone who can coordinate with federal prosecutors and international asset recovery specialists. I have someone in mind, I said, thinking about Judge Graves' network of former prosecutors and white-collar crime specialists. Third, we need to consider your personal security. If Tom realizes what you've discovered, if he understands that he's facing criminal charges and financial ruin, he might become desperate. The photographs flickered through my mind, evidence of months of surveillance, proof that Tom and his accomplice had been treating me like a target rather than a person. I can handle Tom, I said. Can you handle Wise? Because based on these communications, this person is the operational leader. Tom might be the face of the scheme, but Wise is the brain. That was the question that had been haunting me since Victor first intercepted the encrypted messages. Who was Wise, and how long had they been planning the systematic destruction of my life? There's one way to find out, I said. We force them to reveal themselves. How? I smiled, and for the first time in weeks, it felt predatory rather than performative. We give Tom exactly what he wants. A peaceful divorce, with no lawyers, no complications, and no questions asked. I don't understand. Tom thinks he's won. He believes he's successfully stolen everything and that I'm too trusting to investigate. So we let him think that. We let him believe his plan worked perfectly. While you're actually doing what? Setting a trap. If Tom thinks he's safe, if he believes I've signed away all my rights and accepted his settlement, he'll get careless. He'll contact Wise. To celebrate, he'll move the remaining assets, and he'll make the mistakes that will allow us to identify his accomplice and recover everything he's stolen. Anya studied my face for a long moment. That's a dangerous game, Lena. If Tom realizes what you're doing, then we make sure he doesn't realize it until it's too late. I stood to leave, already mentally preparing for the performance I'd need to maintain. Tom wanted a peaceful divorce from a trusting wife who wouldn't ask difficult questions. He was about to get exactly what he'd asked for, and it was going to destroy him. Renasha's law office occupied the top floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle, with views of Puget Sound that probably cost more per month than most people's mortgages. She'd built her reputation representing high-net-worth women in divorce proceedings that resembled military campaigns more than legal negotiations. Lena Rivera, she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. I've been looking forward to meeting you ever since Solomon called. Rena was smaller than I'd expected, with silver haircut and a precise bob and eyes that missed nothing. Her reputation preceded her 3 consecutive years as Seattle's top divorce attorney, with a client list that read like a who's who of tech executives and Fortune 500 CEOs. Thank you for seeing me on short notice, I said, settling into the leather chair across from her desk. Solomon Graves doesn't make recommendations lightly. He says you're facing a complex financial fraud case disguised as a divorce proceeding. I spent the next hour laying out everything I'd discovered: Tom's shell companies, the forged signatures, the offshore accounts, the surveillance photographs. Rena listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. This is impressive work, she said when I finished. Most of my clients don't discover this level of financial deception until after the divorce is finalized. By then, asset recovery becomes exponentially more difficult. Tom is expecting me to sign a settlement agreement this week. He's been pushing for a quick resolution. I imagine he has. Rena opened a file cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. In my experience, men who commit this level of financial fraud always want quick, quiet divorces. They're counting on their wives' desire to avoid conflict. She opened the folder and showed me photographs of documents, bank statements, corporate filings, asset transfer records. These are from a case I handled 2 years ago. Similar pattern. Shell companies, forged signatures, offshore accounts. The husband walked away with $12 million while the wife got the marital debt. What happened? We clawed back every penny, plus damages, plus criminal charges that sent him to federal prison for 8 years. Rena's smile was razor sharp. The key was letting him think he'd won right up until the moment we served him with papers. That's what I want to do. Let Tom believe his plan worked while we build an unassailable case. It's risky. If Tom realizes what you're doing, he could disappear with whatever assets he's already moved. We'd spend years fighting extradition battles in countries with questionable cooperation agreements. What's the alternative? Immediate action. We file for divorce on grounds of fraud, seek emergency asset freezes, and coordinate with federal prosecutors for criminal charges. Tom would be arrested within days, all assets would be frozen, and the case would be resolved through the courts. I considered the option, but it felt reactive rather than strategic. Tom had spent months planning his betrayal, building elaborate systems to steal my wealth and destroy my financial security. I wanted more than just stopping him. I wanted to dismantle his entire operation and ensure he faced consequences for every aspect of what he'd done. I want to set a trap, I said. Let Tom complete his plan while we document every step. When he thinks he's won, when he's moved all the assets and believes he's safe, then we destroy him. Rena leaned back in her chair, studying my face. That requires extraordinary self-control. You'll need to continue living with Tom, perhaps being intimate with him, all while knowing what you know. Can you handle that level of psychological pressure? I've spent 3 weeks doing exactly that. The next phase will be different. Tom will be celebrating his victory, making plans for his new life, possibly even flaunting his relationship with whoever wise is. You'll need to smile and play the role of a woman gracefully accepting the end of her marriage. I can do it, all. Right then, Rena opened her laptop and began typing. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to sign Tom's settlement agreement, but we're going to modify it in ways he won't notice. What kind of modifications? Legal tripwires. Clauses that look like standard boilerplate language but actually provide grounds for voiding the entire agreement if Tom has committed fraud. Discovery rights that appear limited but actually give us broad access to financial records. Venue. Provisions that ensure any disputes are resolved in Washington state courts rather than jurisdictions Tom might prefer. Rena pulled up what looked like a standard divorce settlement agreement, but as she scrolled through the document, I could see subtle language changes highlighted in yellow. For example, she pointed to a paragraph about asset disclosure. This clause appears to accept Tom's representation of marital assets, but the language actually requires him to warrant that his disclosure is complete and accurate. If we later discover hidden assets, the entire agreement becomes voidable due to material misrepresentation. Tom will have lawyers review the document. Won't they catch these modifications? That's the beauty of it. These changes use standard legal language that appears in thousands of divorce agreements. Unless Tom's lawyers are specifically looking for traps, they'll read this as boilerplate text. Rena scrolled to another section. Here's another example. This paragraph appears to waive your rights to certain financial discovery, but the actual language preserves your right to investigate fraud, identity theft, and criminal misconduct. Tom thinks you're giving up your ability to challenge the settlement, but you're actually preserving every legal remedy you might need. The elegance of the strategy impressed me. Tom would get exactly what he wanted, a signed settlement agreement that appeared to give him everything he'd stolen, but he'd actually be signing a legal document that would facilitate his own prosecution. What about timeline? I asked. Tom is expecting me to sign something this week. We can have a modified agreement ready by tomorrow. It will look identical to whatever Tom presents, but with our legal landmines embedded throughout, and then we wait. We monitor Tom's activities, document his asset transfers, and build a comprehensive case. When he's moved the last dollar and believes he's safe, we file simultaneous civil and criminal actions that will freeze every asset and charge him with every crime he's committed. Rena closed her laptop and fixed me with a steady look. Lena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. What? Are you doing this for justice, or are you doing this for revenge? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the tactical aspects of my response to Tom's betrayal that I hadn't examined my own motivations. Does it matter? It matters for how we structure the case and what outcomes we pursue. Justice seeks accountability and restoration. Criminal charges for Tom, recovery of your assets, legal consequences for his actions. Revenge seeks punishment and humiliation, public exposure, personal destruction, maximum suffering. I thought about the surveillance photographs, the forged signatures, the casual way Tom had discussed destroying my life with his unknown accomplice. I thought about 3 years of marriage that had been a carefully orchestrated theft, 3 years of sharing a bed with someone who'd been systematically betraying me. Both, I said. I want Tom to face legal consequences for what he's done, and I want to recover every dollar he's stolen. But I also want him to understand what it feels like to have your life dismantled by someone you trusted. Rena nodded slowly. I can work with that. But remember, revenge is a luxury that can compromise justice. If at any point you have to choose between personal satisfaction and legal victory, choose victory. It lasts longer. As I prepared to leave, Rena handed me a business card with only her name and a phone number. This is my direct line, she said. If at any point you feel unsafe, if Tom becomes suspicious, if anything goes wrong with this plan, you call me immediately. Day or night. Do you think Tom might become violent? Men who commit sophisticated financial fraud usually aren't physically dangerous, they're calculating rather than impulsive. But when they realize they're facing prison time and financial ruin, desperation can change their behavior. I slipped the card into my purse, next to Victor's burner phone and the USB drive containing copies of all the evidence we'd gathered. One more thing, Rena said as I reached the door. This plan requires you to maintain operational security at a level most people can't sustain. No emotional breakdowns, no confrontations, no moments of weakness that reveal what you know. Can you handle that? I thought about the years I'd spent in cybersecurity work, maintaining professional composure while investigating threats that could destroy entire companies. I'd learned to compartmentalize, to separate analysis from emotion, to function effectively. Even when dealing with information that was deeply disturbing. I can handle it, I said. I believe you can. But Lena? Rena's expression was serious. When this is over, when Tom is facing the consequences of what he's done and you've recovered everything he stole, you're going to need to process the emotional impact of what you've been through. Professional composure is a survival strategy, not a permanent solution. As I rode the elevator down to street level, I found myself thinking about Rena's warning. For 3 weeks, I'd been focused on gathering evidence and building a case, treating Tom's betrayal as a technical challenge rather than an emotional catastrophe. But late at night, when Tom was sleeping beside me and I was analyzing the latest intelligence from Victor's monitoring systems, I could feel something cold and hard building in my chest. Not just anger, something more systematic and calculating. Tom wanted a peaceful divorce. He was about to discover that peace was a luxury reserved for people who didn't systematically betray the ones they claimed to love. The war was about to begin, and I intended to win it completely. Hannah Whitmore arrived at our condo on a Thursday evening, carrying a duffel bag and the sullen expression that seemed permanently etched on most 16-year-old faces. Tom's daughter from his first marriage visited twice a month, a custody arrangement that had always felt more obligatory than affectionate. "Hey, Hannah," I said, opening the door to find her standing in the hallway with her characteristic mix of teenage defiance and uncertainty. "Is my dad here?" she asked, stepping into the foyer without making eye contact. "He's working late. Client dinner." I gestured toward the kitchen. "Are you hungry?" "I was just making pasta." Hannah shrugged, which I'd learned to interpret as acceptance. Over the 3 years I'd known her, we'd developed a relationship built on mutual respect rather than forced intimacy. I didn't try to replace her mother, and she didn't resent my presence in her father's life. As we moved through the routine of dinner preparation, I found myself studying Hannah with new eyes. She had Tom's dark hair and blue eyes, but where his expressions were carefully controlled, hers were refreshingly transparent. If Tom was hiding something from his daughter, Hannah would be a window into aspects of his life I couldn't access directly. "How's school?" I asked, stirring sauce while Hannah set the table. "Fine, same as always." She paused, then added, "Dad said you guys are getting divorced." The directness of her statement caught me off guard. Tom and I had agreed to tell Hannah together, but apparently he'd decided to handle the conversation himself. "Yes," I said. "We've grown apart. It's nobody's fault." Hannah nodded, her expression thoughtful. "He seemed relieved when he told me, like it was something he'd been planning for a while." The observation sent a chill through me, but I kept my voice neutral. Divorce is complicated. Sometimes people are relieved when difficult decisions are finally made. Maybe. Hannah opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of water. "He's been different lately. Happier, but also more secretive. Like he's got some big project he's excited about but can't talk about." I forced myself to continue stirring the sauce, though every instinct was screaming at me to probe deeper. Hannah was providing intelligence about Tom's state of mind, and I needed to gather it without arousing suspicion. "Different how?" I asked casually. "More phone calls, more late nights, more business trips, but also more, I don't know, energetic? Like he's working on something important." Hannah sat down at the kitchen island. "And there's this woman who calls sometimes. Yasmin something. He always takes those calls in his office with the door closed." Yasmin. Wise. The mysterious accomplice, whose encrypted communications Victor had been intercepting. "Business associate?" I asked, keeping my tone mildly curious. "Maybe. But it's weird she calls his personal phone, not his work line. And when she does call, he gets this look." Hannah trailed off, seeming to realize she might be sharing too much. "What kind of look?" "Like when I was little and he was planning surprise birthday parties." Excited but secretive. Hannah picked at the label on her water bottle. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this stuff." "It's okay," I said. "We're still family, even if your dad and I are getting divorced." The conversation moved to safer topics: Hannah's classes, her plans for summer break, her college application timeline. But my mind kept returning to her casual revelation about Yasmin and Tom's excited secrecy. After dinner, Hannah retreated to the guest room to work on homework while I cleaned up the kitchen. Tom arrived home around 9, bearing flowers and a bottle of wine, his usual peace offerings when work kept him away. "Sorry I'm late," he said, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. The Henderson account required more hand-holding than expected. "No problem. Hannah's here." "I know." I texted her. Tom set the flowers on the counter and opened the wine. "How was dinner?" "Fine. We talked about school, college applications, normal teenage stuff." Tom nodded absently, pouring wine into the glasses. His phone buzzed, and I watched his expression change subtly, a tightening around his eyes, a slight smile. He glanced at the screen, then at me. "Work email," he said. "I need to respond to this quickly." He disappeared into his home office, closing the door behind him. Through the thin walls, I could hear the low murmur of his voice. A phone call, not an email response. 20 minutes later, Hannah emerged from the guest room with a glass of water. "That's the Yasmin voice," she said quietly, nodding toward Tom's office. "The what?" "The way he talks when she calls. Different tone, more intimate, I guess." Hannah's cheeks flushed slightly. "I know it sounds weird, but I've heard him talk to enough clients to know the difference." The implication hung in the air between us. Tom's relationship with Yasmin wasn't purely professional. "Hannah," I said carefully, "has your dad mentioned any major changes in his business lately? New partnerships? Big deals? Anything like that?" "Not directly, But he's been talking about travel more, places he wants to visit, things he wants to do, like he's planning some kind of major life change. Hannah hesitated. He asked me about studying abroad next year, programs in Europe, maybe taking a gap year before college. Europe, where Tom's offshore accounts were concentrated, where extradition would be more complicated, where a man with stolen millions could disappear into a comfortable anonymity. That sounds exciting, I said. Yeah, but it's weird timing. I mean, if you guys are getting divorced, shouldn't he be focused on that instead of planning trips? Out of the mouths of babes, Hannah's 16-year-old logic had identified the same inconsistency that had been bothering me. Tom's timeline didn't make sense unless the divorce was part of a larger exit strategy. Tom's office door opened, and he emerged looking satisfied in a way that made my skin crawl. "Hannah, sweetheart," he said, his voice warm with paternal affection. "How's the college application essay coming?" "Fine, Dad. Just working on the personal statement." "Excellent. Remember what we discussed about showcasing your international perspective. Admissions committees love students with global experience." The three of us chatted for a few more minutes about Hannah's college plans, but I found myself analyzing every word Tom spoke. References to international programs, mentions of travel opportunities, subtle encouragement for Hannah to consider studying abroad. It all fit the pattern of a man preparing to relocate permanently. After Hannah went to bed, Tom and I settled into our evening routine. He reviewed financial reports on his laptop while I worked on client presentations, both of us maintaining the comfortable domesticity that had defined our marriage. "Lena," Tom said, looking up from his computer, "I've been thinking about our settlement discussions." My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice steady. "What about them?" "I think we should finalize everything quickly. The lawyer I consulted said there's no reason to drag this out if we're both in agreement about the terms." "That makes sense. What's the timeline?" "Papers should be ready by Monday. We could have everything signed and filed by the end of next week." Next week. Tom was accelerating his timeline, which meant either something had spooked him or he was nearing the completion of his asset transfers. "That's fast," I said. "Is it too fast? I thought you wanted to keep things simple." There was something in his tone, a subtle test, a probing question to gauge my reaction. Tom was watching for signs of suspicion or resistance. "No, that's fine," I said. "Simple is better." Relief flickered across his features. "I'm glad you feel that way. This whole process has been easier than I expected. Because you think you're getting away with it, I thought. Because you believe I'm too trusting to investigate, too compliant to fight back." "Tom," I said, as if the thought had just occurred to me, "what are you planning to do after the divorce is finalized? Any major changes?" "Nothing dramatic. Focus on work, maybe do some traveling I've been putting off." He closed his laptop and gave me his full attention. "What about you?" "Probably the same. Build the business. Take on some international clients." "I've been considering." "International clients sound exciting. What kind of opportunities?" The question felt loaded, as if Tom was fishing for information about my post-divorce plans. I wondered if he and Yasmin had discussed the possibility that I might pursue them internationally. If I discovered what they'd done. European companies, mostly. Cybersecurity consulting for firms expanding into new markets. Tom nodded thoughtfully. "Europe is a great market for that kind of work. Lots of opportunities for someone with your expertise." The conversation continued for a few more minutes, but I could feel the subtext underneath every exchange. Tom was gathering intelligence about my plans while revealing hints about his own. We were both performing, both probing, both preparing for a conflict neither of us was acknowledging directly. Later that night, as Tom slept beside me, I used Victor's encrypted phone to send a message. "Yasmin identity confirmed as wise. Need full background check ASAP. Timeline accelerating." Victor's response came within minutes. "Already on it. Preliminary results by morning." I lay in the darkness, listening to Tom's steady breathing and thinking about Hannah's observations. Tom's excited secrecy, his plans for European travel, his intimate phone conversations with Yasmin, all of it painted a picture of a man preparing for a new life built on the ruins of his old one. But Hannah had given me something else. Insight into Tom's emotional state. He wasn't just stealing money, he was planning a romantic escape with his accomplice. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was personal in ways I was only beginning to understand, which meant my response needed to account for both the theft and the affair. Tom and Yasmin had destroyed my marriage and stolen my assets while planning their happily ever after with my money. They were about to discover that some fairy tales end with the dragon winning. Victor's message arrived at 3:47 a.m. Estonian server. Access confirmed. Ready for extraction. Need 4-hour window. I stared at the encrypted text on the burner phone, my heart hammering despite weeks of preparation for this moment. Tom was sleeping beside me, his breathing steady and undisturbed, completely unaware that his entire digital empire was about to collapse. The timing was perfect. Tom had a client presentation in Vancouver the next day, a legitimate business trip that would keep him out of the country for 36 hours. Yasmin, according to Victor's intelligence, was in Switzerland coordinating final transfers. They'd both be physically distant from their servers when we struck. I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, typing my response, go. By I was in Victor's warehouse command center, surrounded by monitors displaying code that looked like digital warfare. Victor sat at the center of it all, his fingers dancing across multiple keyboards as he orchestrated what he dubbed Operation Phoenix, the systematic resurrection of my stolen assets from the ashes of Tom's deception. Status report, I said, settling into the chair beside him. Estonian data center breach successful, Victor replied without taking his eyes off the screens. We're inside Tom's primary server cluster. Jesus, Lena, the amount of data they've been collecting is staggering. One monitor showed file directories with hundreds of folders, financial records, surveillance reports, forged documents, and encrypted communications spanning back 18 months. Another screen displayed real-time banking data from accounts in 6 different countries. They've been planning this since before we were married, I said, watching timestamps scroll past. Earlier, look at this. Victor opened a folder labeled Target Assessment, dated 2 years ago. Inside were detailed profiles of my business finances, client relationships, and personal assets. They researched you like a military intelligence operation before Tom ever proposed. The violation was breathtaking. Tom hadn't just betrayed our marriage, he'd targeted me from the beginning, treating our entire relationship as an elaborate con game. Show me the money, I said. Victor pulled up a network diagram that looked like a financial family tree. Total theft confirmed at $4.7 million, he said. Your initial estimate was conservative. They hit business accounts, investment portfolios, real estate equity, even your retirement funds. The number hit me like a physical blow, but I forced myself to focus on the tactical situation rather than the emotional impact. Where is it now? Scattered across 12 accounts and 4 countries. But here's the beautiful part. Tom and Yasmin were so confident in their security that they used automated transfer systems. Everything is controlled by scripts running on these servers. Victor opened another window showing what looked like financial software. I'm not just extracting evidence, Lena. I'm taking control of their entire operation. For the next 3 hours, I watched Victor systematically dismantle Tom's digital fortress. Every forged document was copied and secured. Every financial transaction was traced and documented. Every encrypted communication was decrypted and archived. But the masterpiece was the asset recovery program Victor had constructed. Tom gave me the keys to the kingdom when he automated his theft, Victor explained, showing me lines of code that represented millions of dollars. These scripts were designed to move money from your accounts to his. All I had to do was reverse the logic. On the main screen, I watched as funds began flowing in the opposite direction. Estonian accounts emptied into Swiss banks, which then transferred everything to Cayman Islands Holdings, which finally deposited the money into new accounts I controlled. You're stealing it back, I said. I'm recovering stolen property using the same methods Tom used to steal it, Victor corrected. Every transfer is documented, every transaction is logged, and every dollar can be traced back to its legitimate owner. The legal distinction mattered. When federal prosecutors reviewed Victor's work, they needed to see evidence of asset recovery, not additional theft. What about Yasmin? I asked. That's where it gets interesting. Victor opened a new window showing surveillance footage from a Swiss bank. Her real name is Yasmin Kadri, and she's been running financial fraud operations across 3 continents for the past decade. Tom wasn't her first target, he was her latest victim. The security footage showed a woman in her 40s, elegantly dressed, conducting business with the professional confidence of someone who'd done this many times before. Tom thought he was running the operation, Victor continued. But look at these communication patterns. Yasmin was giving orders, not taking them. Tom was her inside man, not her partner. The revelation reframed everything I thought I understood about Tom's betrayal. He hadn't masterminded the theft of my assets. He'd been recruited by a professional criminal who specialized in targeting successful women through romantic manipulation. How many other victims? I asked. At least 6 that I can identify. All successful businesswomen, all married to men who suddenly decided they wanted amicable divorces. Victor pulled up a directory of files labeled with women's names. Yasmin's been perfecting this scheme for years. I stared at the list of names, each one representing a woman who'd been betrayed by someone they trusted, whose life had been systematically dismantled by a stranger wearing the face of love. We're going to stop her, I said, already in progress. Victor opened another window showing frozen account notifications. Every account Yasmin controls is now locked pending fraud investigation. She can't access a penny until Interpol sorts this out. And Tom's in for a surprise when he tries to access his accounts tomorrow morning. Victor grinned with the satisfaction of a predator who'd just completed a perfect hunt. Every password changed, every access token revoked, every financial instrument frozen. As far as the digital world is concerned, Thomas Whitmore no longer exists. The scope of Victor's counterstrike was elegant in its completeness. Tom and Yasmin had spent months building a sophisticated theft operation, and Victor had dismantled it in a single morning while turning their own tools against them. How long before they realize what's happened? I asked. Tom will know something's wrong as soon as he tries to check his accounts. Yasmin will figure it out when the Swiss banks start asking uncomfortable questions. Victor began shutting down the monitoring systems. I'd say you have maybe 6 hours before they understand the scope of what they've lost. 6 hours to prepare for Tom's reaction when he discovered that his carefully planned escape had become a trap. Is there any way they can recover from this? I asked. Not legally. Every transaction we've made is documented and legitimate. We're recovering stolen property using methods that will hold up in any court. Victor paused, his expression serious. But Lena, desperate people do desperate things. When Tom realizes he's facing federal prison time instead of a comfortable retirement, he might not react rationally. I can handle Tom. Can you handle Yasmin? Because she's the real threat here. Professional criminals don't accept defeat gracefully. And she's going to blame Tom for the security breach that exposed her operation. The thought of Yasmin turning against Tom added another layer of complexity to an already dangerous situation. I'd been preparing for Tom's reaction to discovery, but I hadn't considered the possibility that his criminal mentor might decide he'd become a liability. What do you recommend? Accelerate your timeline. Don't wait for Tom to figure out what happened. Force the confrontation on your terms, in a controlled environment, with backup ready if things go wrong. Victor handed me a secure phone loaded with every piece of evidence we'd gathered: financial records, surveillance footage, communication intercepts, and most importantly, documented proof of the asset recovery that would restore my financial security. Everything you need is on this device, he said. Transaction logs, account numbers, legal documentation. When you're ready to end this, you'll have everything required to put both Tom and Yasmin in federal prison for the next 20 years. As I prepared to leave Victor's warehouse, he grabbed my arm gently. Lena, I need you to promise me something. What? When you confront Tom, when you reveal what you know and what you've done, don't do it alone. Have backup, have witnesses, have people who can intervene if the situation becomes dangerous. I've already arranged for that. Good. Because what we've done today isn't just asset recovery, it's the complete destruction of two people's lives. They're going to lose their freedom, their money, and their future. That makes them unpredictable. I understood Victor's concern, but I'd been planning this confrontation for weeks. Tom would be expecting a peaceful dinner with his soon-to-be ex-wife, a final civilized conversation before they went their separate ways. Instead, he was going to discover that his victim had become his hunter, and unlike Tom, I hadn't underestimated my opponent. Tom returned from Vancouver looking relaxed and confident, carrying flowers and a bottle of champagne. He kissed me at the door with the practiced affection of a husband celebrating a successful business trip, completely unaware that his digital empire had been systematically destroyed while he was gone. How was the presentation? I asked, accepting the flowers with a smile that felt like wearing a mask. Excellent. The Henderson Group is moving forward with the full portfolio restructuring. Tom opened the champagne with theatrical flair. This calls for a celebration. What are we celebrating? New beginnings, he said, pouring to glasses. Fresh starts for both of us. The irony was so thick I almost choked on it. Tom believed he was celebrating the successful theft of my life savings while I was actually celebrating his impending destruction. Speaking of new beginnings, Tom continued, I had the lawyers finalize our settlement agreement. We could sign it tonight and file the papers tomorrow. That's fast. No point in dragging things out. Tom handed me a champagne flute, his eyes bright with anticipation. I thought we could have a nice dinner, sign the papers, and toast to the next chapter of our lives. I sipped the champagne, noting the way Tom's hand trembled slightly as he raised his glass. Excitement or nerves? Was he eager to complete his theft, or was he beginning to suspect that something had gone wrong? Where would you like to have this dinner? I asked. That little French place in Belltown. Intimate, quiet, perfect for a civilized conversation. Between two adults who respect each other. Le Petit Coq. I knew it well, a small restaurant with discreet seating and a reputation for handling the private conversations of Seattle's elite. Tom had chosen the location carefully, somewhere public enough to ensure good behavior but private enough for sensitive discussions. That sounds perfect, I said. What time? 7 o'clock. I already made reservations. Of course he had. Tom had orchestrated every detail of what he believed would be our final meal together, the moment when I would unknowingly sign away my rights to everything he'd stolen. I'll be ready, I said. As Tom headed to his office to catch up on emails, I sent a carefully crafted message to Rena Shah. Tonight, Le Petit Coq, PM, backup table requested. Her response was immediate. Confirmed. Documentation ready. Are you prepared for this? Was I prepared to sit across from the man who'd systematically betrayed me for years and maintain perfect composure while revealing the complete destruction of his life? Was I ready to watch Tom realize that his carefully planned theft had become his own trap? Yes, I typed back. The afternoon passed with surreal normalcy. Tom worked in his office, occasionally emerging to share details about his successful business trip. I responded with the appropriate interest and enthusiasm, playing the role of a supportive wife who was gracefully accepting the end of their marriage. At 6:30, I began getting ready for dinner. The dress I chose was significant, a navy blue sheath that Tom had always complimented, conservative enough for a serious conversation but elegant enough to project confidence. I wanted to look like the woman he'd fallen in love with, not the victim he believed he'd created. You look beautiful, Tom said when I emerged from the bedroom. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal gray one he reserved for important client meetings. We looked like a successful couple preparing for an elegant evening out. If only he knew what was really about to happen. Le Petit Coq was exactly as I remembered: intimate lighting, discreet seating, and the kind of quiet sophistication that encouraged private conversations. Tom had requested a corner table, partially hidden from other diners by strategically placed plants. This is perfect, I said as we settled into our seats. I wanted our last dinner as husband and wife to be special, Tom replied, signaling the waiter for wine. Our last dinner indeed. The conversation started normally: work updates, mutual friends, safe topics that maintained the illusion of an amicable separation between two people who simply wanted different things. Tom ordered the wine with elaborate care, as if the quality of the vintage mattered for the business transaction he believed he was conducting. Lena, Tom said after the appetizers arrived, I want you to know how much I've appreciated your understanding through this process. Not every divorce proceeds this smoothly. I've always believed in handling difficult situations with grace, I replied. That's what I've always admired about you. Your professionalism, your ability to separate emotion from practical considerations. The compliment stung because it contained a grain of truth. I had been professional about our divorce, but not in the way Tom imagined. I'd approached his betrayal like a cybersecurity threat, analyzing the attack vectors, documenting the damage, and preparing a systematic response. Speaking of practical considerations, Tom continued, pulling a leather portfolio from his briefcase. I have the settlement documents here if you'd like to review them. Of course. Tom opened the portfolio with the careful attention of someone handling precious documents. The settlement agreement was impressive, bound in legal folders, multiple copies, every page flagged with colored tabs indicating signature lines. The lawyers did an excellent job, Tom said, sliding a copy across the table. Everything is clearly defined, no ambiguities, no potential for future disputes. I opened the document and began reading, though I'd already reviewed every clause with Lena. The agreement appeared to give Tom everything: the condo, the investment accounts, most of the shared assets. In return, I would receive a modest settlement that wouldn't even cover my legal expenses if the document were legitimate. This seems quite generous to you, I said, flipping through the pages. I want to be fair. You've built a successful business, and you don't need the assets from our marriage to maintain your lifestyle. The casual dismissal of millions of dollars in stolen assets almost broke my composure, but I maintained my professional mask. What about timeline? I asked. When would these transfers take effect? Immediately upon signing. The lawyers have already prepared all the necessary paperwork for asset transfers, account closures, property deeds. Tom's voice carried a note of barely concealed eagerness. We could have everything finalized by the end of the week. That's very efficient. I believe in handling business matters expeditiously. I continued reading the agreement, noting the carefully hidden legal tripwires Lena had embedded throughout the document. Tom had no idea he was about to sign a confession that would facilitate his own prosecution. Tom, I said, looking up from the papers, before I sign this, I'd like to ask you something. Of course. Are you happy? The question seemed to catch him off guard. Happy? With how things have worked out, with the decisions you've made, the path you've chosen. I leaned forward slightly, studying his face. Do you feel good about the man you've become? Tom's expression flickered confusion, wariness, perhaps a hint of guilt. I think we've both grown in ways that made this divorce inevitable. I'm at peace with that. At peace. I repeated the phrase, tasting its irony. That's an interesting choice of words. Why? Instead of answering, I reached into my purse and pulled out Victor's secure phone. Tom watched with growing unease as I placed it on the table between us. Tom, do you know what this is? A phone? It's a secure device containing every financial transaction you've made in the past 18 months. Every forged signature, every unauthorized transfer, every communication with Yasmin Kadri about the systematic theft of my assets. The color drained from Tom's face so quickly I thought he might faint. His hand, reaching for his wine glass, began to tremble. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice had lost all its confidence. Whitmore Holdings LLC. Registered in Delaware 6 months ago. Bank accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Estonia. Shell companies used to hide the $4.7 million you've stolen from me over the past 2 years. Tom's eyes darted around the restaurant, as if looking for escape routes or witnesses who might overhear our conversation. Lena, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was yours, I interrupted, my voice calm and professional. You believed you were dealing with a trusting wife who wouldn't investigate her husband's sudden desire for divorce. You were wrong. I opened the phone and began scrolling through the evidence Victor had compiled. Bank records, communication intercepts, surveillance footage, years of systematic betrayal documented with digital precision. You've been stealing from me since before we were married, I continued. Yasmin Kadri recruited you to target successful women, and I was your assignment. Our entire relationship was a con game designed to give you access to my assets. Tom's professional composure finally cracked completely. How did you? When did you? I've known for weeks. I've been documenting every crime, tracing every stolen dollar, building a case that will send both you and Yasmin to federal prison for the next 20 years. Lena, please, let me explain. Explain what? How you forged my signature on dozens of documents? How you used my identity to open accounts I never authorized? How you and your criminal mentor planned to disappear to Europe with my money while I struggled to rebuild my life? Tom leaned back in his chair, his face pale and his hands shaking. The confident businessman who'd entered the restaurant had been replaced by a cornered animal who'd suddenly realized the trap he'd walked into. What do you want? He asked quietly. Justice. I slid a different set of documents across the table, not the settlement agreement he'd prepared, but criminal referral forms I'd already filed with federal prosecutors. The Department of Justice received my complaint this afternoon. The IRS has frozen all accounts associated with your shell companies. Interpol has issued warrants for Yasmin's arrest. Tom stared at the documents as if they were written in a foreign language. Your peaceful divorce, Tom. It's been granted. You're divorced from your money, divorced from your freedom, and divorced from the comfortable retirement you plan to enjoy with stolen assets. Please, Tom whispered. There has to be some way we can work this out. I can return the money. We can handle this privately. The money has already been returned. Every dollar you stole has been recovered and secured in accounts you can't access. I leaned forward, my voice as cold as winter rain. You have nothing left to bargain with. The waiter appeared to refill our wine glasses, oblivious to the life-changing conversation happening at our table. Tom waved him away with a gesture that looked more like surrender than dismissal. What happens now? Tom asked. Now you face the consequences of your choices. Federal prosecutors will file charges within the week. Asset forfeiture proceedings have already begun. And Yasmin, I smiled without warmth. She's discovering that her Swiss bank accounts have been frozen pending international fraud investigations. Tom buried his face in his hands, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered the surveillance photographs, the forged signatures, the casual way he'd discussed destroying my life with his criminal accomplice. Tom, look at me. He raised his head, his eyes red with what might have been tears or terror. You wanted a peaceful divorce, I said. Congratulations. You're getting exactly what you asked for. No drama, no fighting, no complications. Just the quiet, systematic destruction of everything you tried to steal. I stood to leave, placing enough cash on the table to cover our untouched dinner. The signed settlement agreement is in your briefcase, I said. The one you thought would give you everything you'd stolen. Instead, it gives prosecutors everything they need to convict you. As I walked toward the restaurant's exit, I heard Tom's voice behind me, desperate and broken. Lena, please, don't do this. I paused at the door and looked back at him one final time. The man I'd married, the man who'd systematically betrayed me, the man who was about to learn that some victories come with prices too high to pay. I'm not doing anything, Tom, I said. You did this to yourself the moment you decided to treat our marriage as a business opportunity. But I loved you. The lie was so audacious, so completely divorced from reality, that I actually laughed. No, Tom, you loved my money. The difference is about to become very expensive for you to understand. I left him sitting alone at our corner table, surrounded by the legal documents that would end his freedom and the wine he'd ordered to celebrate his successful theft. Peace, as it turned out, was exactly what he was going to get. Federal prison was famously quiet. 6 weeks later, I sat in my office overlooking Elliott Bay, reading the morning news with a satisfaction that had nothing to do with caffeine. The headline in the Seattle Times business section read, "Tech executive sentenced in international fraud scheme." The article was clinical in its description of Tom's downfall: 18 months in federal prison, complete asset forfeiture, and a restitution order that would follow him for the rest of his life. Yasmin Kadri had received a harsher sentence, 5 years and deportation to face additional charges in 3 other countries, but the numbers didn't capture the real story. They didn't describe the systematic destruction of a criminal enterprise that had victimized dozens of women across multiple continents. They didn't explain how a routine divorce proceeding had evolved into an international law enforcement operation that recovered over $20 million in stolen assets. Most importantly, they didn't mention the quiet satisfaction of a woman who'd turned her betrayal into a masterclass in strategic revenge. Knock, knock, Anya said, appearing in my doorway with 2 cups of Cuban coffee. Thought you might want to celebrate. Celebrate what? The fact that your business just landed the largest cybersecurity contract in Seattle's history. Anya settled into the chair across from my desk, grinning with the satisfaction of someone who'd helped engineer a perfect victory. Rivera Cybersecurity Solutions has officially been retained by the Department of Justice to develop new protocols for tracing international financial fraud. The irony was perfect. My expertise in dismantling Tom's criminal operation had led to a federal contract that would triple my business revenue while helping other victims recover from similar schemes. How does it feel? Anya asked. I considered the question while sipping my coffee. 6 weeks ago, I'd been a victim of sophisticated financial fraud, my life savings stolen by someone I trusted completely. Today, I was the owner of a thriving cybersecurity firm with clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies to federal law enforcement agencies. It feels like justice, I said. And Tom? Tom is learning that federal prison has very strict rules about electronic communications and international wire transfers. We sat in comfortable silence, watching ferries cross the bay while Seattle went about its morning routine. The city looked the same as it had 2 months ago, but everything had changed. I was no longer the woman who'd been blindsided by her Husband's betrayal. I was someone who'd turned that betrayal into a weapon that destroyed the people who'd wielded it against me. Lena, Anya said eventually, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you miss him? The question caught me off guard. In all the weeks of legal proceedings, asset recovery, and media attention, no one had asked about the emotional impact of discovering that my marriage had been an elaborate fraud. I miss who I thought he was, I said carefully. I miss the version of Tom that existed in my imagination, the supportive partner, the shared future, the life we were supposedly building together, but not the real Tom. The real Tom was a criminal who targeted me for financial exploitation. There's nothing to miss about that. What about trust? The ability to believe in people, to open yourself to the possibility of love without constantly analyzing motives and checking for hidden agendas. That was the question I'd been avoiding, the emotional damage that couldn't be repaired through asset recovery and criminal prosecutions. Tom's betrayal had taught me that the person closest to you could be your greatest threat, that love could be weaponized, that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe that part of me is gone permanently. Maybe. Or maybe you just need time to heal from having your life systematically dismantled by someone you loved. Before I could respond, my assistant knocked on the door. Miss Rivera, there's someone here to see you. Says it's personal. I looked up to see Hannah Whitmore standing in my doorway, looking older than her 16 years and carrying the weight of having watched her father's public disgrace unfold in newspapers and courtrooms. Hannah, I said, standing to greet her. Come in. She entered my office with the careful composure of someone who'd learned to navigate difficult conversations with adults. The past 6 weeks had been brutal for her, watching her father's arrest, dealing with media attention, managing the social stigma that came with being related to a convicted criminal. I wanted to thank you, Hannah said, without preamble. For what? For not involving me in the legal proceedings, for keeping my name out of the newspapers, for making sure I could finish the school year without reporters following me around. During the investigation, prosecutors had wanted to interview Hannah about her father's activities and her inadvertent role in providing intelligence about Yasmin. I'd intervened, arguing that Hannah was a victim of her father's crimes rather than a witness to them. You didn't deserve to be punished for your father's choices, I said. Still, you could have used me to build a stronger case against him. Other people probably would have. The observation was accurate but painful. Hannah's testimony about Tom's secretive behavior and his relationship with Yasmin would have strengthened the prosecution's case. But destroying a teenager's relationship with her father, even a father who'd proven himself to be a criminal, seemed unnecessarily cruel. How are you doing? I asked. Better than expected. My mom got full custody, obviously. The college fund Dad set up for me was frozen as part of the asset forfeiture, but Hannah paused, looking embarrassed. I heard you made sure I could still access money for tuition. During the settlement negotiations, I'd insisted that funds genuinely intended for Hannah's education be preserved separately from the criminal forfeiture proceedings. It was a small gesture, but one that ensured Tom's daughter wouldn't be denied opportunities because of his crimes. Everyone deserves a chance to build their own life, I said. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Hannah straightened, her expression determined. I'm planning to study cybersecurity in college, digital forensics specifically. I want to help people who've been victimized by financial fraud. The announcement surprised me. Hannah had always been interested in technology, but I hadn't expected her father's crimes to inspire a career choice. That's a challenging field, I said. Good. I like challenges, and I like the idea of using technology to catch criminals instead of helping them. The implicit criticism of her father hung in the air between us. Hannah was choosing a path that represented the exact opposite of Tom's betrayal, using her skills to protect people rather than exploit them. If you're serious about this, I said, Rivera Cybersecurity Solutions offers internships for college students with the right aptitude and ethical framework. Hannah's face lit up with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since Tom's arrest. Really? Really? But you'll have to earn it through academic performance and demonstrated commitment to the field. No special treatment because of our personal connection. I wouldn't want special treatment. I want to succeed on my own merit. After Hannah left, promising to stay in touch and update me on her college applications, I found myself thinking about legacy and transformation. Tom's betrayal had destroyed our marriage and stolen years of my life, but it had also created Something unexpected, a young woman determined to fight the kind of crimes her father had committed. Perhaps that was the real victory. Not just the recovery of stolen assets or the criminal convictions, but the ripple effects that would prevent other victims from suffering the same betrayal. My phone buzzed with a text from Victor. New case. Tech executive in Portland, suspicious husband, missing assets. Interested? I stared at the message, thinking about another woman facing the same systematic betrayal I'd experienced. Another criminal enterprise that needed to be dismantled. Another victim who deserved justice. Send me the details. I typed back. As the afternoon light shifted across Elliott Bay, I began reviewing the preliminary intelligence Victor had gathered on our next target. Another sophisticated financial fraud scheme. Another criminal who believed their victim was too trusting to investigate. Another opportunity to turn betrayal into accountability. Tom had wanted a peaceful divorce, and he'd gotten exactly what he'd asked for. But his legacy wouldn't be the comfortable retirement he'd planned with stolen money. His legacy would be a woman who'd learned to turn trust into a weapon, betrayal into evidence, and love into the most precise form of justice imaginable. I opened my laptop and began building a new case file. There was work to do. And somewhere in Portland, a woman who didn't yet know she was being systematically robbed by someone she trusted. But she would know soon enough, and when she did, she'd have allies who understood exactly how to respond. The war against financial predators was just beginning, and I'd learned that the best revenge wasn't served cold. It was served methodically, completely, and with receipts. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will take you there. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. It would mean a lot.